Hi, my name's Rob Sowden from Aspire Europe, and I'd just like to stand back and look at program management through a different lens for a moment. Something that was identified by a good friend of mine, a guy called Grant Avery down in New Zealand, who looked at program management through the eyes of mountaineering. So he put together this great book, which looked at life in Antarctica and also compared the 1996 Everest tragedy with the role of program leadership. And in the Everest tragedy, um, lots of people died after a number of commercial teams went horribly wrong on the mountain. So, some of the things that Grant's highlighted, the complexity of mountaineering versus the complexity of program management. Okay, not many programs actually put our lives at risk in the way mountaineering does, but the one thing they have in common is high complexity. We then got to think about the increasing commoditization of skills and approaches. We can see it in program management. Most of you guys will already have your MSP, I'm sure, or you'll have read the book and suddenly you've an instant expert in the subject. But it takes years to become competent in program management. It's a highly complex area with lots of competing dynamics. There's no such thing as an easy program. Same applies to climbing Everest. Yeah, what we were seeing in that 96 strategy, it was the increasing growth of commercialization as people could pay to get to the top rather than earn the right over years. That increased the pressures on the people making decisions to succeed and beat previous records. Yeah, people were selecting organizations based on their climb rate, just like you go to training companies and you'll select their MSP capability based on their exam pass rate, which of course has very little to do with it really. What you really want is to look at training companies that can prove they make a difference to organizations through their training. However, let's back to the comparison with mountaineering and program management. So they're both dangerous places. They both have death zones. Let's be honest. Yeah, programs are dangerous places. If you're not ambitious, you won't get into program management. You'll sit comfortably back in project management. But there's risks, and those risks in mountaineering are to your lives, whereas in program management, they're more to your reputation, but also to the ongoing sustainability of an organization. But we'll come back to that later. You've got limited time to deliver. The analogy with mountaineering and particularly with Everest was there's only one time window where you can get up to the top of that mountain each year. Not quite as difficult in program management, but we will have constraints, heavy constraints around us. And when you're under pressure, you have to make quality decisions. They're not so easy. Yeah, they're more difficult the more pressure you come onto. That's why program managers need to be able to assimilate data efficiently to get there. Both high risk, and in truth, you take a few wrong turns and you're finished. You're finished on a mountain in a far more perilous way than you are in a program. Once a program goes off track, it's really difficult to get it back on track. So, some of the sources of the issues that the Everest tragedy um, came across, highlighted by Grant in his book. So, firstly, obviously, is high altitude. It's dangerous, but climbing had become a commodity. Less skillful people were involved, and people had more inflated egos about how they approach things. We then had competition for competing operators trying to win you 50 grand to take you up the mountain. As I mentioned, like with training companies in program management, business objectives, summit yields, which is the same as exam yields, client needs, want to do it quicker, and all that kind of stuff start to diminish the quality of the environment that you're creating. Now, if you take that into a program management environment, program boards are in this situation, and in a way, programs are set up to have contention on their program boards because each program manager, or sorry, each business change manager will have different business objectives. Summit yield, let's talk in terms of benefits yield, shall we, for each part of the business, and that those yields may actually compete with each other. So as one part of the business is seeking to consolidate its benefits, it may be at the loss of other parts of the business. So you have a natural contention on that program board that you need to be aware of. Not all BCMs are going to have the same business objectives, and they're likely to not be the same as the program managers. So as a result, it's not unusual to fail to form collaborative relationships. I remember reviewing a program down in Australia in a bank where they were looking to upgrade their financial trading systems. There were really very little collaboration going on. But when you stood back and looked at it, it was hardly surprising, because there was a program team trying to roll in an IT system, which had been majorly expensive. There was pressure to get the thing in, but the business change managers were representing the trading floors and all the kind of people around it. They didn't want to lose trading time if that system went wrong. So it was very difficult to create a collaborative relationship, but they weren't there and it wasn't helping. Again, failure to form sophisticated working groups, change teams, project teams, the PMO teams, getting them to work together. Now, if we looked at the Everest tragedy, they didn't work together at all. You basically had isolated climb teams working to get their clients up the mountain. Well, how similar is that to being in a program and seeing isolated project teams saying, come hell or high water, we're going to deliver our bit together. So the program is about keeping that lot together. Now, if we looked at the Everest tragedy, there was no program layer. Yeah, it was lots of projects trying to get somewhere, and come hell or high water, they were going to get there, and they really didn't care about any of the other project teams. Hence, you start to get regressive behavior. People become inflexibility. How many times have you seen this in the project world, in a program environment where you need projects to work together, but they're going, that's my time, that's my cost, that's my quality, I'm going to get this baby done. So thinking about how you actually build this relationship. Now in Everest, obviously that costs lives, and it's unlikely to cost lives in our projects. But at the program level, it's about creating that flexible environment that allows people to collaborate effectively together. And we're going to come on to this in a couple of slides. So what happens then? Rules get broken. Yeah, roles don't get performed. Inability to save ourselves and others. So some of the examples that were happening in the Everest tragedy. So you had teams from different continents. There was Japanese teams. They tried to speak in English. There was low levels of understanding at times. And what this bullet is highlighting is, if you watch the film, some teams agreed to drop oxygen on the mountain and didn't do it. That lack of oxygen on the way down, when the problems hit, cost a lot of lives. And again, if we stand back and look at program management, we've got a blueprint that says the capability we need, project managers taking shortcuts, business change managers changing their minds, people not bought into the wholeness of what you're trying to deliver. All the same things are there when we're comparing to these teams that were on Everest. And then once we get the attachment to the ego, and of course this is where our sponsors and our SROs start to come in, start to think, well, we've got this far, we're not going back. We've spent this money, we're not willing to accept that we might be about to get things wrong. So this attachment to our egos, our beliefs about how things could work, starts to become really powerful, but it really starts to distort our decision making, particularly when you've got a group of them on a program board. You could have 8 or 9 of these egos working almost against each other. And finally, the unconscious service to the managed self. These are the people that are actually the commercial people who are paying to get up there, right? Ultimately, why would anybody want to pay that sort of money to climb that mountain? And so the suggestion from Grant is that they have damaged self-esteems in some way, or there was something broken in their lives that they were trying to fix. So they were not willing to take no for an answer when it came to, we shouldn't climb the mountain, or the weather forecast was bad. They were going to go up that mountain, whatever it cost, in terms of the climbers' lives, their own lives, the lives of the team. In his book, Grant gives us some great insights into leadership styles for managing risk. And the overwhelming one that we saw coming through was narcissistic, where that approach was almost crippling to effective decision making. So there was people denial of the limitations and the vulnerabilities that they existed within. You had assertive fee paying clients pushing, pushing, and pushing to go up that mountain, difficulty forming relationships within the teams as well as between the teams. The only thing that kept them together was the Sherpas. Leaders did all the planning but with no cooperation. So they were not combining. So if you think about this in the context of a program world, if we've got a lot of projects planning without cooperating, and if we've got a weak program layer not taking control of those projects, we can be in serious difficulties. The same applies to business change management. If they're all demanding things for their business area and they're not collaborating, we will we are going to end up with no benefits and we'll probably end up in a worse place than we started. Okay, the egos needing to be pampered. Yeah, the clients, but we also see it with stakeholders, don't we? If you think about your programs, you've got to pamper to the whims of certain stakeholders. Their egos become more important than the delivering of the program. Yeah, episodes of narcissistic rage, what we saw in the case in the film and in the book, is these various leaders ranting, yeah, at getting delayed, anger at changes to plans, anger at basically anything that caused them the potential to fail. Again, the drive of many of their clients seemed inexplicable, but they had spent a huge amount of money being there and they expected results. As Grant said, it was almost as if they were trying to repair some point in their life that they hadn't achieved the end goal with. And so it was a massive ego trip for them. And that was driving the behavior of the team leaders. And of course, they wanted to be at the center of attention. Now, the team leaders wanted to be at the center of attention in the climbing teams, and the people who were paying wanted to be in the center of attention. So you had this massive collision of egos. But how often do we see that on program boards? Senior managers wanting to get their own way. It's a big issue that we need to be aware of. Yeah. Merging with powerful idealization of what life should be like. How are they going to actually live this dream afterwards? That they've been at the center of the universe, that they've been to the top of the world. These were not good places to be. And again, so we're thinking about what can we do about this in a program environment? Well, one of the things, I guess program managers and program directors, we wouldn't be in those roles if we didn't have some narcissistic influence, right? We believe in ourselves, right? But it's knowing when that belief needs to be moderated and we need to listen to others and collaborate. So some alternative styles of leadership you might want to consider. Authentic, yeah, showing to everybody, working with the team, actually helping them get belief in you, right? So you don't have to tell them what to do. They naturally want to follow you. You can talk about your previous experience. You can talk about when the last time I was here. Yeah, you can talk about why you're making these judgments and you can kind of bring people into the decision making. Then alternatively, and possibly not one that will work brilliantly well on a climbing expedition, is servant leadership, where you're actually allowing the team to make the decisions. Now, if you think about the Everest climbing groups, rather than one team leader trying to step in and try to coordinate them, you could see three approaches there. The narcissistic, I've done it loads of times now, you guys need to listen to me, is one approach. There's another approach that could be, now guys, if we don't get ourselves sorted, we're going to be in big trouble up there. Might have been the authentic approach. And the servant approach could have been, okay, you guys come up with the decisions and I'll help you actually get the job done. All right. So there are approaches there that we could be considering using when we're managing risk in a program environment, but it's not just risk, is it? It's managing the whole program. We got different styles, and there's probably not one moment for that for any one of those styles. You need, as a program leader, to be able to use all of them. So, what are the lessons for program leaders from the Everest expedition and the problems that they experienced? Well, there's plenty, isn't there? Firstly, watch out for narcissistic behaviors in your organization. Now, this could come from your sponsor, it could come from the program manager and director, it could be coming from the change leaders. Is their behavior appropriate? Are we seeing anger and rage? How many times have you seen it comes from frustration, but it's there? And what's the reaction to it? Are we just denying our limitations? Are we making the right decisions? Or are we taking higher and higher risk? Because don't forget, once a program starts to run late, we're more inclined to take risks to try and get it back on schedule, aren't we? And some of our dialogue becomes more ludicrous if we're not careful. Watch out for aggressive team behaviours. Are they backing off? Are they letting the leader decide what's going on? We had in the UK the Crossrail programme that was due to go live roughly in December 2019, I think it was. And you know, that programme was still saying it was going to go live in August of that year when none of the stations had been completed. So you look at that and go, well, how did anybody not know that this thing wasn't going to happen? And now it's sort of when it was replanned, it was 3 years. It was 3 years late, but nobody wanted to say anything. And all you can attribute that to is it must have been at the top. There must have been behaviours going on that were stopping people telling them this isn't going to work. So we're looking at regressive team behaviours there. Are we becoming dysfunctional? Are we seeing people back away from the group because they're not in agreement? Watch for group shift. I was listening to there was a discussion recently about COVID and what went wrong in the UK, and the ex-Secretary of State said one of the problems we had when we were looking at pandemics is we had groupthink. We shifted into a space where everybody thought a pandemic would be a flu. Nobody expected it to be COVID. So do we start all agreeing on things? This is why it's so important to have independent assessments of what's going on. Yes, somebody come in and actually do independent assurance, so they can actually lay it on the line and say, this isn't working. Somebody needs to face up to it. Watch for excessive process policing. Yeah, rather than dealing with the big issues, we start checking that the dots and the T's are crossed, so that people are focusing at the minutiae rather than the big picture, because the big picture's too ugly to take on board, because you're looking at it going, it's horribly wrong. And if we just take that example with Crossrail, I bet everybody was doing their highlight reports every month very carefully. All the logs were being filled in, all the systems were being updated, but with nobody was looking at probably something like earned value that was saying, you know what, you're nowhere near completion. One of the things here is that saying, do you know, in every program, there is nothing other than a high risk program. All right. So if your program is thinking it's medium risk, then maybe it's underestimating the challenges ahead. And some of the things that we've covered in our risk course look at things other than cost, because most people see high risk as high cost, but high risk is more linked to high complexity and high complexity of change, novelty, and those things. So it's really important to think about such things. All right, but you can almost assume that the level of risk in your program is higher than you think. When things go wrong, teams have to work harder, yeah, to compensate. Sometimes risk can happen out of the blue. But the other thing to watch out for is, are teams working really hard to compensate for the lack of realization of the dangers you're facing? All right, so there's something to think about there that we don't normally. If the team's working very hard, it could be you're just under resourced, or are they working hard to make up for something else? so that you fail to spot things going wrong in your risk assessment or the way that you're managing your program. So it's not just about risks, as in the things over in the register. It's about how you've scoped and scaled this program. Is it bigger and badder than you expected? Watch out for high personnel turnover. All right, we want staff to turn over. We want people to move on. We want them to progress. What we don't want is for them to be here and gone in 3 or 4 months. And this is the problem with, between full-time people and contract people. Looking at a program full of short-term contractors is a little message in itself about things not being good. Some of the biggest, most successful programs that we've come across, thinking in terms of someone like Thameslink, in the way that the construction side of it was done anyway, a lot of those people on that program had been there for 5 or 10 years, and it may be worth you taking time out to look at our video around characteristics of high performing organizations, which touches on this. The one thing you're going to get if you've got poor risk management or poor leadership, you're going to have poor team performance. Everybody's competing again, people are non-collaborating, and that would definitely be what you would see from a kind of narcissistic, aggressive leader. In fact, actually, they might even collaborate to avoid doing what the leader says in a particularly regressive scenario, but you're not going to get high performance out of them. And beware of the growing complexity of the risk environment. Yeah, are we seeing risks building? Are there residual ones? Institutional changes that affect the way the program's being treated, the way it's regarded, the way it's being trusted. These are kind of other things that kick in that you might wish to be considerate of. So hopefully, hope that's 20 minutes of useful input. Okay, well, hopefully that's proved useful to you, reviewing and thinking about the role of program leadership in high risk environments. Thanks for taking the time to listen in.